everyone, welcome back to Katie's Favorite Recipes. Today I've got 3 great one-pot meals for you all. These are perfect for busy weeknights. They require minimal cleanup and they're really simple, realistic recipes that your family is going to love. That's the goal with every one of my videos, is I'm trying to bring you all realistic recipes that you all are going to love. And, that's fairly simple but full of flavor. So I like to make recipes that give us leftovers, so I can send it in my husband's lunch the next day, and we can even have it for dinner the next night if we want to, however we want to do it. Some people don't like leftovers, but we do, so that's why I always make, just a little bit bigger portions with my meals. But for this one, I'm doing 1 pot smoked sausage and rice, and I did 28 ounces, which is 2 packs of smoked sausage. I got the skinless kind. And then I'm going to do 1 onion, and then 1 red bell pepper, and then 2 teaspoons of oregano, a half a teaspoon of garlic powder, a teaspoon of salt, a half a teaspoon of black pepper, a teaspoon of smoked paprika. You can use regular, but I think the smoked paprika gives this such nice flavor, especially it goes along well with the smoked sausage. And then I did 2 tablespoons of tomato paste, 3 cups of chicken broth, and then 3 cups of uncooked white instant rice. That just makes the cook time a little faster on this with using the instant kind, but you can substitute that out for brown rice, whatever you want to do. But this recipe was really easy. It didn't take me long to chop everything up, and then I'm just going to throw it in a skillet. Now, my skillet has raised edges on it. It's kind of deep. So I'm going to show that to you all in just a minute. But I think you all are really going to like this recipe. Right now, while I chop up my bell pepper, I just chopped it into fairly small pieces. I have found that cutting around the core on bell peppers is easier than cutting through the core. That way you don't have to get the seeds everywhere and all that. It just cuts, around the core very easily. And then we'll just cut those into little strips, and then I'm just going to dice that up. But really, just chopping the vegetables, isn't a big deal, and then the smoked sausage, that's just 3 things you got to chop up, so it don't take too long. And then after we finish chopping those up, I'm going to throw some olive oil in my skillet, and then I'm actually just going to cook my peppers, onions, and smoked sausage all together. If you wanted to do it separately, you could do that, but I just did it all together to make it faster, and I still did get a little char on some of them. But once we finish chopping all those up, I'm going to go over here and mix up my seasonings before I put my vegetables and stuff in the skillet. So, as I said, I'm doing 2 teaspoons of oregano, a half a teaspoon of garlic powder, a teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of black pepper, 1 teaspoon of smoked paprika. As far as seasonings go, that's all I'm going to use. If you wanted to substitute any or add any, feel free to do that. But we're just going to stir up all these peppers and onions and smoked sausage and let them get kind of charred a little bit and get, started cooking. But, if you wanted to dump everything in at once, you really could do that. It would just all cook together at the same time. But your onions and peppers probably wouldn't get any char on them, which is fine. Really, it's not a big deal. But I've added my chicken broth, and then I've added my seasonings into there. And I'm just going to stir all of that up really well. And it's going to start simmering. You want to wait till it starts simmering and boiling a little bit before you add the rice to it. Once that starts boiling really well, we're going to throw in the rice. And we are just going to stir that up and make sure that the rice is covered in the juice. And then after we finish stirring that up really well and getting everything evenly spread out in the pan, we are just going to cover that up and let it cook. And I took my lid off and stirred it about halfway through, and then once I'd done that, I just covered it back up and let it cook a little bit longer. I'd say this takes about 15 to 20 minutes depending on how high up you have your burner and all of that. But I actually turned mine off after I stirred it halfway through, and then I just put the lid on it and let it finish cooking that way, and that worked out really well. So now this is finished and it's ready to serve. This was so good. It was full of flavor. I think you all are really going to love this. So now we're going to move on to the next one, which was the one pot beef burrito bowls. This recipe was also full of flavor and super simple and really good. This one I'm also using a half green bell pepper, and I'm just slicing that up, and then I'm just going to dice it. If you want to put a full pepper in, you can, but I just like not a whole lot of peppers in mine. So I'm doing half, and then we're also going to do 1 small onion, 2 cans of black beans drained and rinsed, 1 can of corn drained, 3 cups of beef broth, 3 cups of uncooked instant rice, half a teaspoon of garlic powder. We're going to do some shredded cheddar cheese. We're going to do 2 packs of taco seasoning, your favorite kind. My favorite is the Taco Bell seasoning packets, but you can use whatever you want. And then also I did, of course, 2 pounds of ground beef. But first I'm starting off chopping my peppers and my onions. And once I get those to the size I like, I'm going to throw it all in the skillet with my ground beef. And I'm just going to cook those all together and brown everything up. And I'm going to mash my ground beef down, get the size that I like, which is very fine pieces of ground beef. And we're just going to cook that until everything is good and brown and cooked all the way through. And cooking my peppers and onions with this, I feel like gives the ground beef extra flavor and gives my onions and everything extra flavor as well. So once that gets done, I am going to strain all of the grease out. Once I do that, I'm going to throw everything back into the pan, and then I'm going to do my taco seasoning packets, and I'm just going to follow the instructions on that and cook it the way it says. And after that is finished, this part is optional. You don't have to do this, but I just like to add a little bit of extra flavor. So I'm going to throw in some Montreal steak seasoning just to give it some extra flavor. You do not have to do this. And then I'm going to add in my black beans and my corn. I did 2 cans of black beans just because I really like those and I wanted that extra protein. But you can do just 1 if you would rather. But I'm going to throw those in there, and then I'm going to stir everything up, and I'm going to add my beef broth to this. If you would rather use chicken broth, you can do that as well. But then I'm going to throw my rice in there. And once I finish doing that, I'm going to stir it all up and make sure that it's good and coated. That way the rice can soak all the flavor up really well. And I'm just going to cover this up like I did with the last recipe and just let it set and cook. You don't want to have your burner up super high on this, maybe medium, because it's already really hot and this rice is going to cook really fast. So once we finish stirring all that up and we add our garlic seasoning to it, we're just going to cover it and let it simmer for a little while. This takes about 15 to 20 minutes, like I said. I mean, really it's not a big deal, and you just let it set and cook. I stirred it halfway through, make sure that nothing was sticking and burning on the bottom of it, and then I covered it back up and let it finish cooking. And at this point I did turn my burner off because it only had maybe about 5 more minutes or so left. And this recipe was so good. I topped mine with cheese. You can top it with hot sauce, whatever you want. It's really good. So I think you all will love this. So now we're going to move on, and we are going to do our nacho cheese chicken rice recipe. First, this recipe might sound odd to you, but this was so good. It was one of those cheesy, comforting recipes. You know, when you're looking for something like that, this hits the spot. So I started out and I chopped up my chicken. I used 1.5 pounds of chicken breast tenderloins, and I just chopped those up into bite-sized chunks. Next, I put in my minced garlic, which I did 2 teaspoons of that. I should have put that in first and let it get fragrant, but oh well. And then next I did my teaspoon of onion powder, teaspoon of cumin, teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of black pepper, and then we're going to do 3 cups of chicken broth, 3 cups of uncooked instant rice, and then 2 cans of nacho cheese sauce, your favorite kind. I'll show you what I used here in just a minute. I used pink Himalayan salt instead of regular salt, but if you have regular, just use that, because that is pretty much the same thing. So anyways, after I finish cooking my chicken and make sure it's all the way cooked and I season it really well, I'm going to start adding my chicken broth, and I'm just going to pour that into the pan. And then after I do that, I am going to get my 2 cans of gourmet nacho cheese sauce, and I'm going to dump that in there. And we want to make sure that we scrape the can because this sticks in the can really bad. And after we scrape it out and we dump both of our cans in there, we're going to stir this up really well, and we're going to let it get really hot and the cheese melt down completely before we add our instant rice in here. That way everything will be really smooth and well blended together. And our rice is just going to cook directly in this cheese and chicken broth sauce, and it's going to give it a lot of flavor. So once that all melts down and gets to the perfect consistency of just smooth creaminess, we're going to put our instant rice in there. And we're just going to stir that up really well and make sure that the rice is all covered and coated. And then once we do that, we are going to cover this up and just let it simmer like we have the other recipes. All 3 of these recipes are really low maintenance. I mean, you don't have to do much at all to them. So we're just going to cover this up and let it simmer for about 5 to 10 minutes. And then we're going to start halfway through. We are going to make sure that all of that liquid that has seeped out to the edges of our skillet is evenly dispersed all throughout the rice so it can cook evenly. And then this is so hot that I'm just going to turn my stove off and just let it set and finish cooking with the lid on it. And once it is fully cooked, it's going to look like this. And this recipe is so good. It was perfect whenever we wanted that cheesy comfort food. Oh my goodness, this was so good. And I topped mine with favorite salsa, and that made this amazing. I think you all will love these. Like and subscribe, and I hope that you all enjoy. Thanks!